In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, the Gith are described as tall, slender humanoids with leathery yellow skin and bright black eyes sunken into their heads. Their heads were usually elongated with angular skulls and flat noses, pointed ears, and pointed fangs. They were at one time a slave race for the Illithids out in the Astral Sea, where they would occasionally rebel and be crushed, until the coming of a warrior named Gith. She led a successful coup against their Illithid masters, transforming her people into a warlike militant race whose entire goal was the utter annihilation of the Illithid race. At some point in the early war, Gith brokered a deal with the chromatic dragon goddess Tiamat, earning red dragons as mounts for the best of her warriors, a bond that still exists to this day. The Githyanki, as they're now called, are literally named the Followers of Gith, and retain their military structure under their new immortal leader Vlakith, a Githyanki Lich Queen who rearranged their military system into a strict case system, where strength and warlike rage are rewarded. A subgroup who believed that the Gith were becoming as bad as the Illithids in their desire for conquest were led at some point by a Gith named Zerthamon, and these followers renamed themselves the Githzerai, and were eventually cast out of larger Gith society. The Gith ride red dragons and wield +3 silver greatswords once they have passed the Rite of Warriors passage in killing an Illithid all on their own. The Gith also keep outposts called creches in the material plane for training, cleansing of parasites, and to keep watch for their sworn enemies. It's often said that while the Gith are dangerous and hateful, and their desire is complete control over all beings, they're the only true bulwark against the Illithid menace, and are the shield that protects the people from the horrors of the Astral Sea. The Gith come in a variety of forms, from Gith warriors, knights, monks, and spellcasters, but for this minute mythology we're going to be looking at the Githyanki Knight, which best fits the mythos. The Githyanki Knight has an AC of 18 and 91 hit points. They have great stats across the board, as well as con, int, and wisdom saves that help them against both physical and mental assaults. They are innate spellcasters via their psionic abilities, and can cast Mage Hand at will, jump, Misty Step, non-detection, and tongues 3 times per day, and plane shift and telekinesis once per day. In combat, they make 2 attacks with their +3 silver greatsword, which deals 8 to 18 damage per strike, for a total of 16 to 36 damage per round. As a DM, I would use the Githyanki Knights as the main strikers in a raiding group, or as the primary defenders of a creche. If players are on bad terms with the Gith, or are otherwise on the hit list, I would have at least 2 or 3 knights facing down a party to benefit from their telekinesis and other abilities. I would have at least one of the knights acting as a crowd controller, using telekinesis to grab and throw players who are being difficult or dealing too much damage. I would then use Misty Step to close distance with ranged players or to escape from melee players, and then use full actions each turn to strike twice with the greatsword. Tongues and non-detection should be used outside of combat to allow for diplomacy or stealth, and you should save plane shift for a hasty escape if the battle does not go the Gith's way. In an interview between Charles Strauss and Gary Gygax, Gygax describes the creation of the Gith race as a mix of space opera storytelling and inspirations lifted from Gary Niven's The World of Patavs, which describes the master-slave relationship between 2 psionic races. A rebellion occurs and sparks a galaxy-spanning war that kills nearly all sentient life as it rages across the cosmos, with both the former slaves and masters equally as cruel towards those that stand in their way of the annihilation of their enemies. The Gith were created around the same time as the Slod, and the connection to the Slod and Illithids seemed like a natural connection to Gygax. As for the name, Gary Gygax states that it was lifted directly from George R.R. Martin's science fiction novel The Dying of the Light from 1977, in which there is a race of former mind slaves called the Githyanki. In comparing the monster to the mythos and inspiration, we see that the Gith of D&D are an amalgamation of science fiction, fantasy, mythology, and fever-induced inspiration from Gary Gygax. As such, they have been molded and honed into the perfect enemy of the Illithids, a warrior race reminiscent of the Predators in the Alien vs. Predator franchise, or the Klingons from Star Trek, unrelenting warriors whose entire culture revolves around war, conquest, and the thrill of the hunt. If you enjoyed that video, please leave a like and comment below, and consider subscribing to the channel. You can also join the Patreon for $1 a month to access videos days before they're posted here, as well as other exclusive stuff like short stories, videos, and more.